afternoon. I just finished conducting an interview for two different roles within my organization and interviewing about 14 people, and it's been quite insightful. So I'm actually fresh from the field, giving you these insights. And so some of the experiences are actually fresh on my mind. So as we go through, I'll be sharing some of the things I noticed even from the interviews today and yesterday. So we'll talk about preparation, and I'll talk about it in 5 levels. So I'll talk about knowing yourself, knowing the company that you are vying to be hired for, preparing your toolkit, and practicing some interview questions, and then looking the part. So those are areas that we should look at to be ready to perform prior to the interview. So let's go into knowing yourself, okay? And I think that authenticity is a very key thing when it comes to interviews. Nowadays, with ChatGPT and all these AI tools that help us, put ourselves together well, you will find that when you invite people to an interview, the way they sell themselves, you can see that a computer is selling them what to say. There is no authenticity. They aren't being themselves. So I'll say the first thing is to understand your strengths, your skills, and your values so that you can sell yourself very well. You find that people have just put in a prompt, so they are talking based on the prompt and just rattling, or as we say, some people have chew baba and they are just pouring the baba. But any good interviewer can see through that you're not being authentic. And most of the time, as the questioning goes on during the interview, we begin to see that, okay, something is missing here, or that authenticity is missing here. So for knowing yourself and being authentic, I think is very, very important, because it also helps the conversation to flow even more naturally. So I'll say the next thing is that prepare like a 30-second personal pitch about who you are, what you do, the experiences you've gathered over the years, and then what you bring to the table. Okay, that will set you apart from everybody else, because nobody else is like you. So your pitch should be personalized or customized to yourself. And then still bordering on authenticity, you must be ready to explain your CV, because it will get there. So like I said in the intro, most of the time people will start saying, I'm a highly driven person, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a that. And then when you start getting into the details about letting them explain, okay, give me an instance where this applied in your career, or give me an instance where this applied, you begin to now see the potholes in between. So knowing yourself and making sure that you prepare a pitch that is customized to yourself is very important, because really those are the opening moments when you get a chance to be interviewed. Just this afternoon, one of the people that I interviewed, it was a panel, and I was on the other side of the panel interviewing these people, and you could tell that this guy was not ready. And before you get into an interview, one thing I always tell people when they get a chance that, listen, you've been shortlisted among a pool of other people who were all fighting for this position, and you finally made the cut to have your door in the foot. So first of all, you must remember that other people have been taken out just to make room for you. And so you must give it your best shot. You must not disappoint yourself, because other people didn't even get the chance to be heard. And attention span nowadays is short. So when you get the chance after you've got your foot in the door, your pitch must be on point. And it takes a lot of rehearsal, speaking to yourself in a mirror, practicing with others. All of that will help you perfect your pitch. Okay. So let's move on. Knowing the company that you're going to be working for. Sometimes people are able to really explain their experiences, their education, their background, all of that very well. And then you get to asking them a few things about the company. You think it's straightforward, but sometimes people actually forget to research the company they intend to work for. Things like the organization's missions, values, how the organization makes money, because at the end of the day, that is what really matters. You must know the value chain of the organization, knowing the role that you've applied for. That's also another thing. And being able to explain how you add value to it. Okay, and I think that for us coming right out of school, there's a lot of information online. Now we're in the phase of information, big data all over. So it shouldn't be so difficult to do a quick research about any organization that you want to work for. And let's not take that bit for granted, because I see a number of people doing that and not really researching the organization they want to work for. Okay. So the next thing I would say is prepare your toolkit, because that is the arsenal you have in, let me say, in your pockets to be able to sell yourself well. So you've got your foot in the door, you've got a chance to speak to a hiring manager for a role. Your resume, your CV must be very updated, very up to date. And you should be able to have like a strong CV that is not just filled with just words, gibberish. Sometimes you see someone's CV, 4 pages, you read through and you realize that it's lacking substance. But nowadays, there are so many tools online that will help you put together a very good CV and a very good cover letter. So I'd say let's take advantage of the technology that we have available to us. Of course, you will need to also make sure that your documentations are ready. So certificates, maybe if you have to work outside of a certain territory, you have the necessary permits, references, your portfolio, whatever ready. You've armed yourself with that information as well. Okay. And then I'll move on to practicing common interview questions. So all this is prior to the interview. We're talking about before the interview. Okay, so there are very basic questions that you should expect in an interview. Tell me about yourself. And most of the time when you ask, tell me about yourself. So when I am interviewing, I won't just say, tell me about yourself. I will say, tell me about yourself and limit it to your exposure, experiences, and what word do I often use? Exposure and experiences limited to this vacancy that you've applied for. Because usually when you open it up and say, tell me about yourself, people start talking about, I'm the first of 4 children. I come from here. We don't need that information. Like I said, you want to make the most of your 30-second pitch about yourself so that it will spark interest for the interviewer to ask more questions. So tell me about yourself. You want to focus on how you coming in adds value, basically. So you come from maybe your educational qualifications and what it has done for you, how it will add up to the value that you bring to the table, maybe other experiences you've had elsewhere, internships you've done, how all of that brings value. Basically, when we say tell me about yourself, that is what really matters. And then another question you should practice. Why do you want to work here? Or what is your motivation? Basically, that is the inspiration behind that question. What is your motivation for working here? Okay, another question that you should practice is talking about your strengths and weaknesses. It gives a sense that you are self-aware. And that is a very good competency or a strong competency that recruiters are looking for, that you are aware of who you are aware of what you bring to the table. So it's a question that you must practice as well. And then behavioral questions. So for example, tell me about a time where you handled a conflict or where you handled a very challenging situation or where you worked with a team, for example. And I put a note down there that there's this STAR model I learned about that will help you give a structured response, especially when you're asked about behavioral questions. So STAR is an acronym. S stands for situation. So you talk about the situation, what exactly the situation was. And then you talk about the task or what was there to be done. And then you talk about the action. What did you do? And then R stands for results. What was the result at the end of the day? It gives your responses to such questions a lot of clarity and structure. All right. And then the final bit about preparing for the interview is looking the part. It's very important that we dress appropriately based on the industry, of course, the company culture, but make sure you dress appropriately. And when you're in doubt, just err on the side of looking formal. You can never go wrong with looking formal. So invest in maybe one jacket, a black suit, a black skirt, or a black dress. Just invest in that so that you look the part when you're invited to these interviews. I've seen people who have come for interviews and just how they look raises a bias. So the person looks really sharp. I organized some interviews some time back, and I saw these gentlemen in the lobby. I actually thought they were coming to see the MD or something. They were looking so sharp. And then later the receptionist calls them, this person enters the interview. I'm like, oh, you were coming for the interview. Unfortunately, when the person opened his mouth, I was so disappointed because the way he was looking sharp, I was expecting something. So it's important that you look the part, but that's why it's the last bit of preparing for the interview, because the more important things is that after you've got access into the room by looking the part, you also want to put yourself forward with what you present, by what you tell the panel. Okay. So let's move on to during the interview. So we talked about before the interview and preparing for that. Now let's come to during the interview itself. Okay, a few tips. So I'll start by saying show up strong. I've mentioned that you must always remember when you get a chance or when you get a call for an interview, remember that other people have been sidelined for you. So don't mess up the opportunity for yourself and for those people who were, put on the back burner. Show up strong, show up ready. Okay, so the first, we know about arriving early. Aside the fact that it will give an indication that you are time conscious, it's also good for you yourself. You are able to settle in the environment that you are in, reduce the nerves, okay, with arriving early. When you enter the space, you give a warm smile. And I always say, approach an interview like a conversation, like you're just here to chat. Of course, you must approach it as a serious conversation. But then if you see it in your mind as you're coming for a conversation, because these people hiring you, they actually need you. And that's why they're looking for you. So don't go in, afraid or timid, but also approach it as these people actually need me. Even though you also need the job, they also need you. And so that confidence exuded in your smile and your posture when you enter the room. Maintain good eye contact in your posture, okay, during the interview. And I'll also say, listen before answering questions. I've seen so many times people are in a hurry to answer the questions. Maybe they think it shows that they are competent. But if you answer in a hurry and then you are rambling or you're making mistakes, what's the point? So it's better you take your time to listen. If you don't get the question, you can ask for a repeat so that you gather your thoughts and then you can answer very well. And during the interview, there's some competencies that are being looked for. For some of us that are coming right out of school, you may not have experience, you may not have work experience, but you will have something called transferable skills. And you will be able to demonstrate that, that, okay, maybe you're looking for a sales representative, but after BC, my mom has a shop where they sell this or that. And so I can transfer those skills here. I think last week I conducted interviews for a sales role. So I'm in an industry where we sell heavy duty equipment for mining, construction, and then generators as well. And one of the people who got her foot in the door for an interview is coming from an agri-based software industry. And so the question we asked her was, are you able to sell? And this person is going to sell over the phone. So you will not meet the customer face to face. Are you able to sell? And she was like, yes. And then we said, what do you know about Caterpillar machines? And she was able to say a few things that she knows, but it was obvious the product knowledge was missing, which was not a problem because, we'll train you on the product knowledge. But one thing that she said, which I really liked, was that before she entered this agribusiness software industry, she had no idea about that industry. And if she's able to today sell you a software, an agribusiness software, she's very certain she can sell you a Caterpillar machine. And I was like, that's a good one. So that's a clear demonstration of transferable skills. And she was able to tell us how she's been able to succeed in that industry. So it's obvious she can transfer those skills when we hire her. And we actually did hire her. Okay. So still talking about during the interview, a few things to avoid. Okay. So one thing is to avoid speaking, or one major thing is to avoid speaking negatively about your past employer or your past school. Okay. It just doesn't send a good message forward. If you didn't leave on a good note, how about taking the lessons from that experience and moving on than coming on to, let me say, bash your previous employer, previous school? It doesn't benefit you in any way. Okay. So rather take the lessons, move on. Okay. Another thing is just memorizing answers. I mentioned in the beginning, you can see that this person has chewed chat GPT answers. Tell us about yourself. He's just going on and on and on. I'm a decision maker, I'm a this, I'm a that. And you can see that there's no authenticity in what the person is saying. Okay. And I mentioned that quickly answering a question. Some people they don't think through and then they are quickly given a response. And then another thing to avoid is lying your way through. You will always be found out. Honesty always goes a long way. It's better to say you don't know than to, try and lie your way through. Okay. All right. I hope I'm not moving too fast. I'm unable to see the chat box because I'm on this slide. So, Dr. Heavy, if there's any feedback, you can let me know. If you can hear me. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, Doc. Okay. Okay, so still during the interview, I'll say prepare to ask some really good questions. Okay. So many times I see people coming in unprepared after the session and don't have any questions to ask. When we ask someone we've interviewed that, do you have any questions for us? It shows a willingness to learn. Most of the time, you see that some people say, oh, I don't have any question, or I'm okay. But this is a new place you are going into. There's some really important questions you should ask. Today, the interview I conducted, the very last person asked a very good question. That within the next 6 months, if I'm hired for this role, what are your immediate KPIs that must be achieved, or your immediate, let me say, your immediate targets that must be achieved? And it was a good one. And we asked him why he asked that question. He was like, he thinks he's very capable and he wants to mentally prepare for the workload. So he wants to know what is expected. So questions like that position you, ensure that you are even ready to, get into the work. So questions like, what does a typical day look like? What does success look like? Or how do you define success for this role? How would you describe the team's culture? What challenges is the team facing right now? So that when you get in, you can hit the ground running. Okay. So we've talked about before the interview, we've talked about preparing or during the interview itself. Now let's talk about after the interview. Okay. So you are done. You've met this panel, you know that you've given it your best shot, you put your best foot forward, you sold yourself. What else is there to be done after the interview? I don't see a lot of people doing follow-ups. So I would recommend it's something to do. You don't lose anything. Some organizations will get back to you, some don't, but at least you've registered your name in their minds. Last week after the interview, only one person sent us a follow-up email, and all he was saying was thanking us for the opportunity, telling us that he gained some more insights about what Mantrack does and what the role requires. And he's looking forward to contributing to the team. Just the vibe alone, even if the person is not being honest, just the way the person is vibing you cry, you may even be sold. Okay. But of course, that's not the only thing. If you did well in the interview and you seal it with this follow-up, it just shows your proactiveness, and how willing you are to step into the role. Unfortunately, this person didn't do so well in the interview. So when I saw his follow-up mail, I was like, oh, Charlie, it is well. Anyway, so another thing after the interview, which I will recommend, is reflecting and learning. What went well? What can I do better? My first ever interview I went for, this is almost 13 or 14 years ago, or over 14 years ago, when I had just finished national service. And I don't even remember how everything went. I just remember I was so shy and timid and I was shaking. And when I finished the interview, I asked the recruiter that, please, how did it go? And she just looked at me and smiled. And you could tell she knew that this is like a fresh person from school. And she was very candid with the feedback she gave me. Very candid with the feedback. And till now, I remember the stuff she told me. One of the things she told me, which I found confusing, was you were too honest. And I was wondering what that, for a long time, I wondered what that meant. But I know now how to play that into being authentic in my responses when I'm in an interview. And I see that people do not ask for feedback after the interview. If time permits, if there's the chance during the session, right after you are done, before you exit, you could ask the panel, what are your thoughts? What are your impressions outside of whether I'm not asking if I'm the final candidate or not, but could you please give me your thoughts on what I could do differently or what I can do better? That teachability or that willingness to learn, even aside it, putting you in a certain light before the recruiters, it's also for your own good to know what you can do better in the future. I think today's interviews, we had two people asking those questions, and I tell you, if they take the feedback and the advice that was given to them by the panel, I can't wait to see where they will be in, let's say, in the next 6 months, if they are given another opportunity to be interviewed. Okay, so it's really important to take the time to reflect and learn and then bridge the gaps. Okay, so let's talk about some tips preparing while we're in school. I added this slide because I know that this is from the business school, so I'm assuming that we are preparing for after school, so we are still in school. Okay, so the first thing I'll say is build your skills. So aside your educational qualification, what your school is giving you, okay, I'll say build skills. You can never go wrong with building your skills. People are afraid that technology and AI will come and take our jobs. It can't. Technology is not human, so that is where the skills that you have built will set you apart. Okay, there are some jobs that technology will come and take over, but there are some that there will definitely be the need of a human interface, and the skills that you built, whether soft skills or hard skills, are what will set you apart. So other skills that are relevant to your industry, courses in Excel, in Canva. I designed this template by myself in Canva. Canva is something you can learn very easy to use. Learning Excel, learning Python, learning how to use the Microsoft Office, Outlook, and all of that. Okay, it's a good way to prepare yourself for after school. And then I mentioned soft skills, so communication, teamwork, problem solving, and I see that the soft skills gap is missing for most of the time. So those coming out of school. So I would encourage you get into whether you have some groups or associations. Okay, it even leads into the next point I'm about to talk about networking. Okay, attending career fairs, events, LinkedIn events. If you have open days or organizations come to your campus to have open days, attend some of these. Okay, join an association in school, do extracurricular stuff, volunteer for projects. All these things are helping you build soft skills that you might not see now, whether it's in leadership, it's in communication, it's in working with a team. All of these skills, I'm telling you, these are all parts of the transferable skills that I was mentioning, that even if you don't have any experience because you're right out of school, you can build these transferable skills and market yourself when you get the chance to be interviewed. And then the last bit I'll share in terms of preparing yourself while you're in school is developing your personal brand. Now, branding is everything. Almost everybody has a social media account. So develop your social media presence. Nowadays, when it's our birthdays, we want to do photo shoots. Please tell the photographer that you want one professional headshot of yourself that you use for your LinkedIn or you use for your social media presence, whether it's on Facebook or wherever, Instagram, wherever you want to have your social media presence. Get some good photos of yourself and use that to establish your presence online as well. Because nowadays, too, recruiters check our social media, try to get a sense of who you are through your social media posts. So make sure that you establish a good social media presence. Okay, I think I'm getting to the end so that we can take questions. I hope I'm making good time, Dr. Heavy. Okay, so I think this is the last main thing I'll share. The session was to talk about competencies that will help us prepare successfully for an interview. And I've shared a number of things I think are very relevant to prepare us for interviews. But when it comes to competencies, these are 5 that I think are priority regardless of the industry that you work in. Okay, so the first is communication skills. And before you come for the interview, let's remember we've established at the beginning that an interview is a performance. You rehearse for every performance. Rehearse your communication skills, whether it's in front of a mirror, in front of a friend, because really an interview is a test of how well you can articulate your thoughts, how well you can explain processes or explain your experiences. I've seen people who are really good when it comes to the technical know-how of the job, but unfortunately, they are not able to sell themselves or communicate effectively, and you would have to pull it out of them, or just leave them to it. Today, like this, the interview, we had the very first person. And if you're a first person for an interview, the expectation is high, the energy is high, the interviewers or the recruiter's mind is fresh because they haven't spoken to anyone else. So they are, looking for that energy to match up with their energy. And so your communication, how well you speak is very important. And how well you explain or communicate is very important. And just as it's an advantage for the first person who enters an interview, the last person too, it might disadvantage you if you don't communicate effectively. Because imagine an interviewer that has been engaging about 10 people since morning. Even if you spend 30 minutes on someone, that's almost 6 hours of talking and listening. So that tiredness or the fatigue alone can introduce a bias. It's a recruiter or an interviewer who is not doing their work professionally. But whether professional or not, you can't ignore the fatigue or the tiredness that was set in. So how well you communicate, how engaging you are, how exciting you sound, all of that will help keep the attention of this person to keep listening to you and keep the attention span so that whatever you or however you want to sell yourself, you're able to do that within the time frame that you have. Okay, so the second competency I think is very crucial, okay, to prepare yourself in before you approach an interview is problem solving and critical thinking. Because really, an organization is hiring you to come and solve a problem. There is a need, and that's why they're hiring you. So you must be able to demonstrate how well you're able to analyze situations, how well you're able to think through a challenge, and how well you're able to propose solutions, okay? Because the long and short, there's a need, there's a problem, and they need someone to fill the gap or solve the problem. And so you must be able to demonstrate your critical, analytical thinking skills. Okay, the next is teamwork and collaboration, because really, when you're hired, you're going to be working with people. Even if you're a one-man team, there'll be other stakeholders or departments that you would engage with. And so you must have that competency of being able to engage with people from different backgrounds, contribute to team success. So some questions may even align with how well you've been able to collaborate with people or be able to work in a team. If you happen to be interviewed for a multinational, you must bear in mind that there are different cultures, different backgrounds, and you must be able to blend well with all these people. So that's another top competency that you must possess. Okay, the next one I'll talk about is your willingness to learn, and especially for anyone who maybe has not had, proper work experience. Let me not say proper, you don't have work experience. Maybe you've done an internship here and there. That too is experience. And I've talked about making sure that you put your transferable skills also on your CV. But if you haven't had a lot of experience, you must also be able to demonstrate how quickly you can adjust to a new environment or learning a new software, and your willingness to learn, your teachability is one thing that a recruiter is looking for, especially with someone who doesn't have a lot of work experience. Okay. And then the last competency I'll mention is professionalism and work ethic, where you're able to demonstrate how responsible you are, how you take responsibility for the work that you're about to do, demonstrate that you are reliable, you can be trusted, and all that. Just to add one bit as a bonus outside of the five is tech savviness. And we know that now we are in an age of technology, and you're in a technology, driven institution. So we must make sure that we are tech savvy, we're in touch with the new technologies that are available, productivity tools, you know how to use Microsoft Office. You hire some people and they don't even know how to draft an email, email etiquette and all that. Let's also be conversant with these things to make sure that we position ourselves well to be successful for interviews. So just in wrapping up, if you didn't take anything from all I said, please remember that you should be authentic, be yourself, tailor your, the experience a recruiter will have with you to yourself, to who you are, to the experiences that you've gathered, whether it's in work or outside of work, which will benefit the organization, and put your best foot forward to show that you are the best person to work with. Thank you very much. So, Dr. Heavy, I'll pause here. I hope I'm making good time. We can take some questions.
Yes, you have made very, very good time. And then the presentation is top notch. I'll take yes, let me take the opportunity to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Gladys Nkrumah, Dr. Sena Govina, Benis Esiama, and then Dr. Ethel Yiragbon Anotinkra. These are lecturers also in the Department of Management Studies, and then they have been right up here with us throughout the process. And now, I have also taken quite a number of things listening to you. I have always been telling my students that life is all about competition. And then I thank God that your last slide talks about authenticity, that it said that be authentic. I've always been telling my students about what rarity means and then what inimitability means for someone to be able to gain competitive edge at any given time. Now, I'll invite both faculty members who are here and then our students to ask questions that are on their mind. So the floor is open. Just raise your hand. I'll pick you up and then I'll call you to ask your question. Any questions? We are waiting. Yes, so wisdom. Yes, I can see wisdom. Yeah, yes, so wisdom. Yes.
Thank you very much, Doc, and thank you very much, Madam Ruth Autry. It was a very insightful presentation. and I have picked a lot. My only question is, you mentioned that, for instance, you should not speak negative about your former workplace or your school. Now, if I'd been in a workplace where I wasn't actually treated well, for which reason I left off, if I am asked to say, for example, tell me about your previous employment, how would you suggest I go about such a scenario? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wisdom. That's
Thank you.
really a good question. Doc,
Mommy,
please, oops. Doc, please, would you want me to answer that first, or we gather a few questions and then we answer at once?
Yes, let me gather a few of them, and then you respond to them. So let me go to Dr. Sena Govina.
Yes, thank you very much. Very insightful presentation by the resource person. Yeah, so my question has to do with strengths and weaknesses. Quite interestingly, I had a discussion with a group of students, and one said to me, what if I don't have any weakness? My argument was there's no perfect human being, but then even if you mention whatever weakness it is, it's advisable probably you talk about maybe how you are working at it, maybe your people skills or your communication skill, whatever weakness it is you have. But what would you advise? Do you mention that you don't have any weakness at all? Is that a good thing to say? Or you mention the weakness, but however, you add that maybe it's something that you are improving upon. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Sena. Let me go to Justice Kofi. Justice Kofi.
Good afternoon, Prof.
Yes, good afternoon, Justice.
Please, I acknowledge the presence of Prof. Teresa Obobisa, my HOD, and Madam Bernice, and all my lecturers. I'm a former student of Ghana Communication Technology University. And my question goes this way. In case in a job interview, a question of this nature is being asked, how much do you think it should be paid when we hire you? What answer do you give?
Okay. Right. Thank you, Justice. And let me take the last one from Bernice. Stella, I've seen your hand, but let me take the last one from Bernice, and then our resource person will provide some responses. Then the second batch, I'll start with Stella. So, Madam Bernice.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Heavy. Thank you so much, Madam Ruth. We've really enjoyed your presentation, and as a lecturer, I've learned a lot of things here. I want to find out, with regard to CV presentation, what are expectations of an interviewee's CV? Sometimes some format of CV allow people to put their pictures on them. Personally, there's been a little debate on that. I would like to know what you think about it and your personal experience and opinion about having your picture on your CV. And I would also like to find out whether one should have one specific CV that you take to any interview at all you have, or there should be some modifications here and there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Madam Ruth will be inviting you. Let me just give you recaps as Sena asks question on weaknesses. If you are asked about weaknesses, what should you say? Kofi Justice talked about questions that may be asked on how much that you should be paid. How do you go about answering such a question? And then Madam Benize Siama also asked about pictures on CV, and if you can use just one CV, prepare one CV and use it like a universal document for any other application that you want to make. So these are the three questions that are here for you to answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. And thank you everyone for the good questions. Okay, so let me take the first one. I think I hinted on that when speaking negatively about your former organization. I think I mentioned that first of all, it reflects poorly on you. It doesn't look good on you, the person, depending on the kind of words that you use and how you approach that conversation, even if you are justified. There's a more professional way to go about it. Okay, so if you recall, I mentioned that you should rather demonstrate how whatever was wrong at your previous employer's place, or whether your previous school or whatever, rather give you an opportunity for growth, what you learned within that. So you don't want to dwell so much on exactly what was wrong. So you could say something like, oh, there were a few challenges that did not align with my priorities, or that were not a fit for my personal growth in terms of my previous employer. However, this is what I learned in the process. I think it's a better way to approach it. Okay, sometimes the conversation could go a way that may force you to push the information out. So last week, one of the people I interviewed, actually the person who sent a thank you email, we realized that he was hinting that something was wrong at where he was. And so we decided to push a bit further. And I'm happy with how tactful he answered the question, because he didn't turn it around on the employer, even though later when we did our research, we realized it was also a problem with the employer. But he rather shared what he learned in the process. I think he was even fired for whatever reason. But then he turned it around to talk about what he has learned and how he will not repeat that mistake when he's hired. So I hope I've been able to answer that. So instead, you can just generalize it. If it's not something that will go into detail, just generalize it, that there were a few issues or challenges with my previous employer that didn't align with my growth, my career path, or my priorities. And then you just move on quickly from what you learned. Just share what you learned from that experience. Okay, and then I think the next question is it okay talking about weaknesses? Whether it's right to say you don't have any weaknesses. It's impossible, just like you mentioned. I think it was Doc. Yeah, it's impossible to say that you don't have any weaknesses. And if you recall, I mentioned that you sharing your weaknesses shows how self-aware you are. And it's easy to, to get feedback or to get someone to grow from a weakness that they acknowledge. Okay. But if you say you don't have any weakness, then it's a big red flag. So instead of maybe saying I don't have any weaknesses, how about you pick a weakness that is not something that will not directly harm your ability to get the job. So this person we interviewed last week, one weakness he mentioned was that he ends up taking on the role of other colleagues because he was a supervisor, because he wants to get things done quickly. He ended up taking their roles, and he realized that he wasn't focusing on his job, and that cost him a lot. And then shared the lesson he had learned out of it. Something like that, it's realistic, and you can see the path to growth demonstrated in that answer. So pick a weakness, not something that will cost you cry that the interview is over. No, but maybe I used to avoid public speaking. I was a shy and timid person, and then you talk about how you've worked on it. It's impossible that you don't have a weakness, and it doesn't demonstrate how aware you are of yourself. I hope I've answered that as well. I think there was a question on answering how much to be paid in an interview when the employer or the recruiter asks you that how much you want to be paid. Okay, so that question is multifaceted, but I'll say first of all, do your research about the role. Nowadays, there's information available, so with a Google search here and there, places like Jobberman or Ghana Yellow, you can get an industry, a figure that you could benchmark based on the industry, what the industry is given. For someone who maybe is coming right out of school or does not have a lot of experience, you could just demonstrate that, okay, you're open to a competitive offer that will position you to do your work excitedly because you are more interested in the role, and how it will develop you and how you also add value to the organization. And then you could give a range that is easier to work with. So maybe based on my research and the value that I believe I'm bringing to the table, I'm looking at something between this amount and this amount, but I'm open for negotiation. It's okay. I think that's a good way to go about that conversation so that it's not awkward and you're also shifting the goalpost back to the recruiter. If you're like an entirely fresh graduate, then you may also be hinting that your goal too is to learn and contribute to the organization, but based on industry standards or industry benchmarking with the industry, this is a range that you believe is fair for the role. Okay, so I hope I've answered that as well. But what you want to do is to be flexible, with such conversations and not sure, like, if you don't give me this amount, I'm not going to take it. Okay. And then I think there was a final question on whether you should have your picture on your CV and how well you should present your CV. Okay. So I would say, first of all, you don't want your CV to be too lengthy that it's cumbersome to go through. And even though, well, personally, I don't see the point of having your picture on your CV because is it that we're supposed to look at your pretty face and give you the job, or we see your beard and then we give you, there's really no point. It's taking up unnecessary space. And unfortunately, you will find that somebody will just be biased against you because of your picture. They've not even seen you in person, but just by seeing your picture and seeing your beard or your hair, they'll say, a salesman with beard, you'll be intimidating to a customer, let's not invite him just because of your picture. So how about you don't have the picture and have the more relevant information that matters, like your career objective or summary, your educational qualifications, your skills, your experiences, any projects that you've had, any volunteering or leadership roles that you've played, any certifications you've had. And then, the CV is leading us to what really matters, but not making you disadvantaged just because someone saw your picture. Unfortunately, it happens. Sometimes people want to buy a book and then the author's face is plastered all over the book. And when they see the person's face, they just don't want to buy the book anymore. I don't know if it's happened to you before. So personally, I would recommend that it's really not necessary to have your face CV. Okay, Doc.
Thank you so much, Ruth Kujo, for the answers that you have provided. Let's take the next barrage of questions. I think Madam Benis has a follow-up, so I'll go to her, then I'll go to Stella. Yes, Madam Benis.
Thank you very much, Doc. And thank you very much for the answer. I was left with one question. On the CV, I asked if one should have one general CV that they present to any interview for any position at all. And also a follow-up on the question about how much you are paid. So from the answer you are given, then it means that when you go for an interview and you have such a question, you shouldn't ignore it, but you should at least, based on the dimensions you've given or tips you've given, you make an attempt to answer it in a more professional manner, but not to just say anything at all. Or you can actually say anything at all and ignore the question too. Thank you.
Yes, Doc, let me just answer Madam Bennett. your salary expectation is not a question you should ignore at all. If we are going to be honest, you're also working to be paid. You're also working to be paid. So you want to answer. It's a very relevant question to answer. You want to answer it very strategically. And like I said, you don't want to have a posture where this is what I want and you're not open to negotiating. So let's not shy away from that question, but rather, if you also don't do your research, it's like you don't even place value on the experiences that you've had, the investment you've made in yourself to educate yourself. No, we can't do that either. So just giving a range and answering professionally, like I mentioned, will help. And then you asked about whether you must have one CV for all job roles. Absolutely not. So for every role that you're applying for, you want to tailor it to what the recruiter is looking for. We put out, when we put out an advert, I'm talking about my organization, even without it being in the newspapers, we just put it on LinkedIn. We have over 500 CVs to look through. So imagine that you haven't tailored your CV to, give us the keywords that we are looking for. And nowadays, a lot of recruiters are using technology. So there's an ATS that does the initial vetting of the CVs. Then it gives a first shortlist before the recruiter or like a human being actually goes through. So a bot will do some of the work. If you don't have certain keywords that are relevant to the role, you can imagine what will happen to your CV. You won't even get picked. So definitely your CV must be tailored to the expectations of the recruiter. Yes.
Right. Thank you very much. That is the first set of questions. Let's go to the second set. Stella, and then please just raise your hand. Yes, Stella, you can go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc, and thank you very much, Dr. Ruth. So I have two questions, and my first question has to do with asking for feedback during the interview. And please, I want to ask if it is appropriate to ask for your feedback during the period where probably the panels or the interviewers will ask you whether you have any question for them. And also, my second question has to do with demonstrating your willingness to learn during the interview. Please, at what point can you do that, or how do I go by that during the interview? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I can't see any more hands up. So I'll then invite Madam Ruth Kujo to provide answers to the question.
All right, thank you, Doc, and thank you, Stella, for the questions. Okay, so if you recall, I mentioned that if it's appropriate, you can ask for the feedback after the interview, not with, do you have any question for us? No, so always prepare a question for the panel to show your readiness. So that should be aside of you asking for your feedback. Okay, so that's the first thing I would say. So depending on how the interview is going, you can ask after everything is done. Okay, this is not to give pressure on whether I'm being considered for the role or not. However, if you don't mind, would you like to give me some honest insights about my performance or my experience or responses as I shared, which may not allow you to recruit me or hire me, or gives you some hesitation to hire me? You can ask something like that after the session is done. Okay. But if you observe the atmosphere and it doesn't allow that, then in your follow-up email, you can add that if they could share some insights on your performance, that will help you develop for future opportunities. You would appreciate that. Okay. So you don't want to ask that question in the middle of the interview when they're asking you, do you have any question for us? No, that's not appropriate, but rather ask at the end. And you're not asking them, are you hiring me? Am I getting the job? Am I your best candidate? No, you're not doing that. You're just asking that you want some feedback for your personal development. Okay. And then You are asking about how to demonstrate willingness to learn. So you share real life examples where you've had a situation where you had to learn something very quickly, whether it's a new skill or a new tool. To today's interview that we had, for instance, our final top candidate, I think one thing that set him apart was when he was hired in his former role, he came in and saw a gap of a technical skill that was lacking in the department. He went on YouTube, watched videos, spoke to someone outside of the organization who trained him a little bit, and he brought that intervention into the organization. And that alone, people didn't even know he brought that solution. So he just sharing that skill demonstrated competencies on all levels, from collaboration, from teamwork, from having personal leadership. So you just share real life examples. And also, if you don't, you must have an example. Even if it's not within work, it could be a transferable skill from somewhere, anywhere else that you've learned something new that you didn't know. But also you should be expressive about being eager to learn or personal learnings you are doing on the side. All of that demonstrates that you are willing to learn. And also acknowledging any gaps. So as the conversation goes with the recruiter, you acknowledge that, okay, I think there's a skill gap here and I'm willing to invest some time to learn about it here. So all those, that mindset and that kind of, posture demonstrates that you're willing to learn.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll take the last question from Wisdom. Time is far spent. So we'll take the last question from Wisdom and then we'll be rounding up soon. Yes, Wisdom.
All right. Thank you very much, Doc. And thank you very much, Madam Ruth, once again. So I'm sure from the top of our heads, most of us would say that this session will be for graduates who will be going out to look for work. And for those of us, some of us who are entrepreneurs, would it be worthy to say that we can mirror, this session or the highlights you've given to say that it would be also beneficial to entrepreneurs or owners of business to sit in that position as interviewers to say these are some of the things you should be looking out for the prospective candidates or interviewees? Would it be okay to say that? Thank you.
Yes, Madam Ruth.
Okay. Wisdom, could you please rephrase your question? Let me be sure that I understand you.
Yes, so I'm saying, much as some of us are students, some other people who are also online are entrepreneurs who probably may not go for any job interviews or something of the sort. So I'm asking, would it be okay to say for their benefits, they can mirror, what you have taught us on this session to say that this should be something that you should also be expecting from interviewees so that you know what to look out for in terms of justifying who becomes the best candidate when you are looking out for an employee?
Absolutely. I think that the things I've shared today are applicable whether you are running your personal business or it's a formal, work setting. It's still applicable either ways. And there are hopefully some of the things I've shared give you insights of competence that you should be looking out for when you are hiring someone, or even just mindset and mental postures of people that you should be engaging with if you want to hire them. So hopefully I've been able to send that across through today's session, but I believe that is relevant to entrepreneurs as well.
All right. Thank you very much. All too soon, we've come to the tail end of the seminar. I have picked some few feed. One is that you remember that employers also need you as much as you also need them. That's one of the things I picked. I picked also that you must, in case you do not have sufficient experience, you must be able to also demonstrate transferable skills. Madam Ruth also noted that an interview is a performance. You must always understand that it is also a performance in itself. So you must treat it with all seriousness. And then you must understand how to explain processes, explain experiences, and also understand that it is a selling point for you. I also picked a few things in addition, that you ought to know the organization's profile, know the mission, know the vision, and also the value chain before you even step your foot at the interview, because this will help you. And then also remember that you must also be able to put down the value that you will be adding to the firm. That should be at the back of your mind. And then make sure you prepare your toolkit. And then one of the beautiful things that I've heard that I think I'm going to integrate into my PowerPoint is the STAR method, which I have not seen till today. This is my first time seeing this model, beautiful model: situation, task, action, and result, which I'm also going to integrate into my slides. So thank you so much. But then I'll invite Madam Benize Siama, who is the chairperson of the Welfare Committee of the Department of Management Studies, to give us the closing remark, as Professor Bobisa had to join another meeting a couple of minutes ago. So she will do that, and then we will then task, I think Jifa is here, Jifa, to do the closing prayer for us, and then we'll call it a day.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Heavy. So as I stand in for Prof. Obisa, I will want to extend my warmest gratitude to our resource person, Madam Ruth. We contacted you on a short notice, but as you said, you are someone who wants to share knowledge. And I think based on that, you were, swift to respond to our needs to be here today. And I'm very grateful that you decided to be here with us. We've learned a lot, and we are very grateful for your time. I hope that we will have such engagements, and we'll be able to tap more into your knowledge. To all the organizers of the program, we are very grateful. And then I think Dr. Heavy has highlighted most of the important aspects of the presentation, so I wouldn't go through that again. And I hope that we all pick some tips for interviews. As lecturers, as students, we all go for interviews every now and then. And I'm sure this knowledge we've had here today is very helpful. I would like to thank our lecturers and our students, our past students who made the time to join. I hope you've also found this insightful, and then together it will help us to, propel in every aspect of our careers. And I hope that we will all be able to make good use of it. And I also hope that going forward, we have such more engagements to learn more for ourselves and for other people who will need it later on. So, I would like to say a very big thank you. And I hope that this will continue. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. I've seen one Esther Esiedu. Is it Dr. Esther Esiedu, or is one of our students called Esther Esiedu? Yes, so that I can acknowledge. Yeah.
Dr. Heavy, it's me.
All right, Doc. So
It's me,
thank you so much for honoring this meeting. And then we'll then ask you to give us the closing prayer.
All right. Our gracious God, we thank you for moments like this, because your word says that we should get wisdom, we should get knowledge. So we thank you for such forums where our minds are open to things that we know or may need to improve. We bless our resources resource person and organizers, and pray that you help our students to utilize this knowledge in a very fruitful way. May your name alone be praised as we live here in Jesus' mighty name with thanksgiving. Amen.
Amen and amen. Thank you so much. Thank you, professors. Thank you, faculty members. Thank you, students. And most importantly, thank you, Ruth Kujo, our resource person. We'll be calling on you again and again. Thank you so much and have a blessed evening.
Thank you.
Say,
Welcome.
Thank you, Doc. We want more.
Dr. Heavy, Dr. Heavy,
Yes, please. Stella.
please, is it possible, Doctor, you can send the material with us?
Okay, we'll have a discussion with her and then we'll see if we can get the slides for you. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you too. Right. Bye.